All right, so hi everyone. Thanks for coming or listening if you're listening later. This session is the Wind Energy Community Standards Working Group kickoff. And what the plan is today. Okay, 15 minutes introductions to us, to the people here. So maybe it's not going to quite take that much time. There's not very many of us. So we do introductions. I then give you a little input about the aims of the working group and the time plan. So this is basically directly copied out of the case statement that we made, that we had to make in order to be accepted as a RDA group. And then Yuri is going to tell you a little bit about what we've done in this direction so far, because it's quite connected to some of the other work we're doing and he's doing. And then we're going to hope for some inspiration from Professor Lynch from the University of Birmingham, who is not involved in wind energy, but is going to talk about something that might be useful and inspiring for us related to the goals of the working group. And then I reserve 30 minutes for a discussion of expectations and a definition of next steps. I think based on the number of people here now, we've probably got quite a lot of play in this plan. So let's just see how it goes. If you want to ask a question, feel free to speak, but you can also write something in the chat. I'm looking at the chat, I'm looking at your faces if you've got your video on. I'll put your hand up, I can probably see you doing that as well. So does anybody have any questions before we get started with that agenda? Or anything that I've forgotten to say or you need to know? All right, so maybe I can just quickly tell you who I am for those of you who don't know. Most of you probably do. So yeah, my name's Sarah Barber. I'm in Switzerland. I lead the Wind Energy Innovation Division at the Eastern Switzerland University of Applied Sciences, which is a small university at the bottom of Lake Zurich. And I've been in wind energy since 2007 and did a PhD in aerodynamics before that. I've been working a lot in aerodynamics and measurements of wind turbines in industry and research. I've been in my current position since 2018, where I've been building up a wind energy group from scratch, which means we need to find a niche. And the niche is starting to go in the direction of digitalization, data standards, metadata, knowledge representation, digital twins, things like that. Seems to be a really big expanding area and a really interesting area. So that's where we're going. I co-lead IEA Wind Task 43, which is IEA Wind is the International Energy Agency, and it organizes a load of collaborative projects between different countries. And IEA Wind is the technology collaboration program in wind energy, and then there's a load of different tasks with different numbers. There's not 43, there's about 20, I think. They last 6 years and then they get a new number. And there are many in different topics to do with wind energy. So lifetime extension or airborne wind or offshore wind. There's one in digitalization, which I co-lead. And in there, we're working on lots of interesting topics, including trying to standardize or at least publish existing semantic artifacts, ontologies, data models about wind energy, and then working together to develop some more. The RDA, where did that come from? I had a small grant to look at improving fairness of wind energy data a year or so ago, and that kind of turned into this idea for, okay, let's have a working group to look more basically at improving the fairness of data in wind energy. So that's where that whole idea came from. I'll tell you about the group afterwards, but from that, I think that's enough for me for now. So maybe I can pass on to Yuri and my team and then ask you all to prepare a short introduction to yourselves if you feel like it and available. So Yuri?
Hi everyone. I think most people know me, but still, for people maybe watching in the recording, I'm Yuri Marikovsky. I'm a PhD student at ATH Zurich, and Sarah Barber is also my supervisor, so I'm also working at OST as a researcher. And my main topic of research and research interest is creating digital twins and digital representations of wind turbines. So obviously digitalization and community standards, data management in general is an important part of digital twins. So that is how I got involved in the topic. We recently published a review paper on basically state-of-the-art of knowledge engineering in wind energy, on the state of what kind of information models or ontologies, whichever way you want to call it, already exist there, and how it can be, with some recommendations, how it can be improved. And additionally, I'm leading one of the work groups in IAA Task 43, which is dedicated into creating new ontologies and new taxonomies, kind of like with a community effort to create the new, more community accepted controlled vocabularies, taxonomies, ontologies, and then publish them on ontology hosting portals and get them adopted by the community. So
Great, thank you. And then I see Martin.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm Maarten Trekels from Messe Botanic Garden in Belgium. Actually, from training, I'm a physicist, but ended up in the biodiversity information world after finishing my studies in nuclear physics. And actually, I came into contact in this group through a project that we're running at the Botanic Garden, which is called BCubed, where we are looking at data cubes of biodiversity data and looking at interoperability. Also within the biodiversity, we are working closely together with GBIF and the biodiversity digital twin effort. And also I'm involved in DISCO, which is a distributed system of scientific collections, which is also looking at fair digital objects of specimens of biodiversity. So it's both occurrences of organisms as well as preserved specimens.
Okay, thank you. And just the connection to the interest in wind energy.
Basically, it's more about interoperability and to see how we can connect the two domains together to make sure that whatever kind of models we use to model biodiversity can match whatever you guys are doing, and see whether there are some collaborations. That's the reason I'm here. Basically, I'm also involved in TEDWIC, which is a biodiversity information standards organization. So I'm also a little bit into how to develop the standards and what's needed for these standards. So that's my interest in this group.
Cool, sounds good. Pleased to have you here. And then maybe we'll just go to the other wind energy people first. So, okay, Lewis, you've just arrived, so I'll give you a couple of minutes to have a breath. We're just introducing ourselves. Anna Maria, do you want to say something? And then after that, maybe Serco. Anna Maria, are you able to talk right now? Oh yeah, you're coming. You're muted.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Anna Maria Semperviva, and I've been working at DTU Wind Energy, DTU Danish Technical University, in the wind energy department, which now is called the Wind Energy Department of Wind Energy and Energy Systems. In 2017, I was working in a project, in a big integrated project in wind energy, a European project. And then we got the idea to map the data that were in this organization, which is the European Wind Energy, the European Energy Research Alliance. And then how to do it and so on. Then we made the metadata and the taxonomy. And then we created the metadata for a group of metadata for the wind energy sector, including the standard metadata plus the metadata for the sector. And then we created the taxonomies for the metadata and the vocabularies for the metadata. So this is, I believe it's one of the first attempt to make something like that, mapping data. And I think this is will be a basis for the for URI, and we are talking about how to develop this further. I've been working in wind energy since '84. So I mean, I kind of, and now I'm retired, but I'm still emeritus at the department. And I've been working in the IATAS 43 since the beginning. Yeah. Actually, my interest is the fair data.
Yeah, which is why it's great to have you here. Thank you. And then Zerko, are you able to speak?
I hope so. At least the microphone says it's active.
Yeah.
Okay, Zerko Schindler, coming from the German Aerospace Center, specifically there, the Institute for Data Science. And I'm currently heading the Department for Data Management and Enrichment. So we are active in plenty of areas regarding digitization in certain engineering domains, specifically in the data management parts and the metadata descriptions, the development of ontologies, fair descriptions of all kinds of stuff. So in these areas. And the reason for this group is pretty much that we are also involved with the wind park that DLR is or has been building up. It's already active. And there will be, for now, an internal data portal, but we try to have this on standard with FAIR principles. So in case it gets open to the public, then we are already on that kind of level.
Cool.
Actually, I'm not alone here, so Marta is sitting next to me. She might introduce herself and right next.
Yeah, hi. So I was already at this meeting in Salzburg. So we are from the same group, and basically most of my activities are around applying the research data management and semantic technologies in multiple different experimental domains and domains that deal with measuring something and so on. And this is in the context of this wind park and wind energy topics in the DLR. I got interested in this group, so some of the technologies and methods that we use for different domains might be also applied here. I just failed to register for RDA, so it was too late, and that's why I'm not officially here, but yeah, I'm still present. So.
All right, great. Thank you. And then Lewis, you've probably got had time to catch up now.
Yes, thanks for giving me a breather there. Hey everyone, I'm Lewis Armistead. I work at Apex Clean Energy as the data operations manager there. I've got about 10 years of experience in working in renewables, mostly on the operations side of the house. So we are constantly looking for ways to improve our analytics, and I'm also very interested in collaborating with the research community more. Which is kind of why I'm involved here. I worked with some folks at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory and elsewhere in some tangential industries to found a nonprofit called Enter, where we're trying to build some open source data standards for renewables in tight collaboration with Sarah and others from this community, including the IEA Task 43 community. But that's a little bit of background about me. I'm excited to learn more and connect with y'all.
Great, thank you. And then last but not least, our speaker for later. I'm really sorry, I'm not really quite sure how to pronounce your first name. Is maybe you can do it yourself, not to embarrass me.
Close enough. Iseult Lynch from the University of Birmingham. Thank you very much for the opportunity to join you all, and I'm sure I learned a lot this afternoon. My background is in chemistry. And for the last maybe 5 or more years, I've also been very involved in FAIR data, specifically around nanomaterials and chemicals and how we make all of that data fair. And that's what I'll talk about a little later. So I don't think I need to say much more than that for now. Thank you.
Are you Irish?
I am Irish, yes, yes.
Just trying to work out your accent and the name and stuff. Okay, Irish, yeah. No.
Yes, it is a Dublin accent.
All right, yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, Ryan, I mean, you want to say something as well about what you're doing here? I guess it would be quite nice.
Yeah, seeing as the last person here. Yeah, so just my name is Ryan O'Connor. So I am not working in this field at all. I've done my academic background is actually in humanities and in literature, but I am working with RDA Europe. So I am working on the RDA Tiger project. So I'm the project senior facilitator. So working with a number of different RDA groups, just supporting them in whatever sort of activities they need. So the Wind Energy Community Standards Group is one of the groups that applied for support from us. So yeah, I'm just here to help out with this session if possible, and I'll be working with Sarah and the other co-chairs throughout the whole 18-month life cycle of the group. So if we're attending regular meetings, then you'll probably get used to seeing my face there.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Did I forget anyone, or did anyone else come while we were talking? No, I don't think so. Speak up if so. Otherwise, we'll continue. We ended up taking 15 minutes after all. All right. So now, just about this working group. So just to recap, this working group now exists, starting now, I think. So we had this whole proposal phase where we wrote a case statement. We also asked people if they're interested, and we got some feedback from some of you for this case statement, and then we submitted it to RDA, and they accepted it, and they also accepted my proposal for having the launch now. And so basically this meeting is really to launch this group, and we have sort of fixed goals and a fixed time plan that we're intending to reach. And so I want to quickly tell you about that in case you don't have the case statement in front of you. So the goal of the group, we said the overarching goal is to reduce data management overhead within and between organizations working with wind. And in order to do that, we want to first of all, create a recommendation called Guidelines for Improving Fair Data Maturity in Wind Energy in Practice. And then as a second step, create this thing called a Fair Implementation Profile, which is a methodology developed as part of Go Fair, giving the scientific and research communities opportunities to express their choice of standards, technologies, tools, and procedures in order to fulfill the FAIR principles. So it's kind of another step on top of, okay, this is how you make data fair, but then it's also like how, which tools, standards you're going to use to do that. And I think Iseult is going to talk about that later, about how she has done that for a different application, just to give us some idea of what that actually means, because many of us probably haven't got a feeling for what that really means. And so the concrete steps that are actually planned are, first of all, to review and evaluate the current data sharing and publishing landscape in wind energy. We actually already started to do this. The paper that Yuri mentioned, I think it comes at the beginning of his presentation in a few minutes as well, called Knowledge Engineering and Wind Energy, actually already reviewed available published semantic artifacts. And we want to extend that to data sharing and publishing in general. So for example, verifying to which degree these artifacts can be described using the available control vocabularies. So we have a number, weave and neat, which Anna Maria already mentioned, and the Task 43 Wind Resource Assessment Data Model. And Yuri's going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And then after doing that, we want to apply this existing RDA outputs, so the FAIR data maturity model, but also guidelines for publishing structured metadata on the web, to a choice of existing data sets. So first of all, to existing open data sets, but then secondly, also to new data that we're going to try to get from companies for this purpose. We want to try to focus on different data sets across the project lifecycle of wind energy. The wind energy has got quite a broad scope. You know, we have the wind turbine manufacturers, but then we also have the wind farm developers, constructors, operators, end of lifetime. And all these data sets are going to be at probably at different fairness levels. So we're going to try to get a diverse representative range. And the fair data maturity model, for example, allows you to take the data and go through a load of criteria and tick off basically, or give it a score based on these criteria. Actually, what I didn't put in here, I'm about to the week after next, I'll be presenting a paper at the Wind Energy, the Talk conference, which is in Florence in 2 weeks, about also actually doing this for an existing data set. So I can also send you that. The paper's not published yet, but once it's published. And then after that, we want to identify high potential areas for improving fair data maturity. So once we've analyzed the data, we can then say, okay, there's this one criteria or these few criteria that are really that are kind of low-hanging fruit to improve. And then after that, then think about, okay, what can we do to improve that in practice in those areas? And then sort of a side thing would then be to make concrete suggestions for actually improving these existing guidelines. We actually already did that in this project that I mentioned that I'm going to present in 2 weeks. Because we actually use these tools, there were some things about the tools which we thought could be improved. And I think that type of information is also really useful for RDA in general. And then after that, we want to create this fair implementation profile, which we'll hear more about later. And then just a few more details about that. So just regarding the data, I run a project at my university called We Do Wind, which is all about trying to persuade the companies to share their data more than they do already, by giving them an incentive. So it's actually saying, it's kind of like a hackathon idea. We've got a load of challenges running in an open innovation ecosystem that people can take part in, and they can use the data to create data science solutions. And the idea is that companies say, okay, I want to get involved in this open innovation. I want some solutions to something I'm trying to do with my data. Maybe the open community can help me do that. Maybe if we have time later, Lewis can tell you a little bit about that, because he's from this company, Apex Clean Energy, who are just hopefully in the process of releasing some data for the purpose of a We Do Wind challenge. And we also already have some data. So from a Swiss company called RTDT, we have some structural health monitoring data, also from Chalmers University of Technology. So we have various data sets already available or going to be made available soon, which we can leverage for this work. So we can use some of the data sets being used anyway for We Do Wind. Just something a little bit about this fair implementation profile. Again, I don't know myself that much about it, but there's quite a lot of information on this website, which I can put in the chat in a minute. And it also has these different FAIR principles listed, and then different questions about how they get enabled. But yeah, have a look on that website for more information. And then going on to putting that into a time plan, I'm basically here on the left. Okay, it says tip instead of FIP. I didn't notice that before. It's just a misspelling. The general time plan is 18 months. And so the tasks that I've written before are just the same ones here. But we do the review in 3 months. We then apply the data maturity model in the next 3 months. Then we kind of analyze the results and choose these high potential areas. We then spend quite a lot of the time developing guidelines for actually improving the maturity, and then creating this FIP at the end and making the suggestions for improving the existing documents here. And then of course we have regular webinars. We planned in some public webinars as well as internal ones, and then some dissemination at the end. The other thing I wanted to mention is that this group, I see this group as part of a larger holistic open innovation ecosystem, which we're currently working on in the We Do Wind project. And so our vision is that we have a wind energy data and code portal here in the middle, open. And then at the top, we have coming into there a load of semantic artifacts, which are going to be published on the Techno portal. We have a funded project called Techno portal, where we're trying to put the existing semantic, the existing ontologies onto there. But we have this whole, as part of Task 43, we have this whole community of people, which Yuri just already mentioned, trying to work together to make these artifacts available, but also develop new ones. And these are then necessary to describe the metadata, for example, for this portal. And then here in the middle on the left, we actually have a community of people bringing in the data and the code. So we also in Task 43 have already started trying to build up a community of people who are actually interested in sharing the data and the code themselves. And that obviously needs to go into the portal as well. On the right, we actually have the current idea of We Do Wind, where we have a data science platform where people are using this code, using this data to improve these codes via these idea of challenges. So we're iteratively working on improving them together. And at the bottom, we also have a load of data and code users who are somehow using this data and code, but not necessarily as part of this inbuilt challenge. And I think it's important just to show this because the idea would be then that the RDA group, I haven't marked it on, but it comes in somewhere around here with guidelines for how to actually prepare the data and the code, or even as a guideline for this knowledge engineering community. Nobody spoke? Okay, Yuri's put the Techno portal link in the chat I've seen. So does anyone, before I pass on to Yuri to talk a little bit more in detail about the work on the FAIR data so far, is there anything about that you want to ask about? I guess I went quite quickly through quite a lot of information. Any questions or further comments? Did someone say something or not? No. Yeah, Anna Maria?
Oh, yeah. Did you think about to connect to the group with they're doing metadata in the research at the RDA? Because they are connected with profiling, the profile of FAIR data profile.
Yeah, I think when we wrote the proposal, we wrote down a load of groups that we would be interested in collaborating with, and it could easily be that one of those was that group, yes. But yeah, I think now we've launched the group, actually having a more of a focus on one or two of these groups that would be most useful for us would be a good step. So I'm just gonna write that down as a note. Make sure we don't forget that.
The description is fitting with what you are doing because the metadata and the ontologies are related. So
What's the name of the RDA group actually?
it's metadata.
Okay.
And you can find it in the program. I can give you the link if you want later.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, just a bit of information on that group. I happened to be in their session earlier this morning. Their sort of interest group has been going for a while, but they're sort of renewing their charter at the moment, so I think they're actually going to be a bit more active now
Okay.
in the future. So I'm happy to make the connection there. Sarah,
Okay, great. Yeah.
That's
So I'll put that as a to-do, Ryan, to connect us with the metadata group. All right. Anything else? All right. So then Yuri, is there any way, can Yuri take over control of the screen? Probably not, huh? Probably have to click for him.
he can't take control of the screen, but I can make him a co-host to share his own screen.
Oh, he can control my screen. He just requested it, and I said yes.
Okay. Oh, that's unusual. Okay.
So does it work?
I don't know how to
He's
use
like-
it.
I think just click, if you just click once on with the left, not with the right mouse, with the left mouse, and then use the right arrow. then
Haha.
you can-
Knowledge.
Teamwork.
Okay. Super briefly about what I'm gonna talk about in terms of work done so far. There are gonna be two major things. One is the knowledge engineering for wind energy review paper I mentioned before that we published. So which kind of looked over current landscape of semantic artifacts. So some of the lessons we learned from while writing that review and some of the conclusions we got. And then another very brief discussion just to give us something to start on discussing later on in the question and the discussion session is about potential reuse of existing taxonomies and specifically the IRP wind ones, the one that Anna Maria has mentioned. So one. It doesn't seem to. Oh, maybe I can. Okay. There may be no problem. So while we one of the purposes of a knowledge engineering for wind energy review paper was to look into in general on the landscape of wind energy to what life cycle stage do the existing semantic artifacts refer to, and also to what audience were they directed to. And apart from the fact that we didn't find that many compared to probably some other fields that are more advanced in this area, we found a very heavy skew for wind farm operation and wind farm planning. And obviously related to that, the primary audience was the energy producers and operators. And we found many areas of the entire life cycle of a wind energy asset being completely neglected. So like financial areas, end of life, logistics and planning, they quite overlooked currently. So that is already gave us some ideas on where can be the areas of future improvement and what stakeholders have been overlooked. In general, in general, we also looked into the quality of semantic artifacts that are there. Are they available for download? Are they maintained? And what was their adoption level? So we found very low adoption, and we mainly attributed it to the fact that most of the semantic artifacts that have been developed are not maintained by the community. They have not been published in a fair way. Which led us to actually the creation of and starting the project of a Technoportal project where we can actually publish taxonomies and ontologies and make them more available to the public, and made us focus on the dissemination phase of the for the IAA Wind Task 43 and also partially for the idea for why this work group has started. So looking into in general into the groups of semantic artifacts that we found, I could group them in these like four major groups. One was the IRP Wind Initiative, and there we saw that it might need significant improvement from conceptual modeling point of view, and we'll discuss it a bit later. There were IAA Wind from variable wind tasks data models. And the problem was for, let's say, for data publishing was that those are very application specific. Something like has very narrow scope, so they would focus on like just LiDAR data or wind resource assessment data model, or multidisciplinary optimization. So the applicability of some of those data models was not very broad enough for us to talk about general wind energy domain publishing data. There were a big corpus of ontologies published as academic articles, and as I mentioned before, most of them were just unavailable, so very limited use potential for those. And then there was also some group of industry developed. I would not even call them ontologies, they're probably like schemas, but there were very rudimentary semantic artifacts, which could be represented just as CSV files, standard forms that people could download and say, okay, you have to fill this kind of CSV file with these kind of column headings. And this obviously is not very much in line with principles of linked data. Okay. So what about the potential reuse of IRP wind taxonomies? This is the current state of what we have right now. We have this list of taxonomies with their names are quite inventive, so it's not always very clear what they're about, but basically we have a taxonomy of just variables, parameters, and constraint, the taxonomy of external condition, wind energy models, taxonomy of topics, WASP terminology, which is the specific tool for wind resource assessment, and then materials taxonomy and energy activities. So just very briefly, what our thoughts on it when we were looking into it. Many of those might need to be augmented and aligned. So like the ones for wind energy variables would need to be aligned with common variable and measurements and units of measure ontologies and taxonomies used in general in sciences. External condition one taxonomy would need to be significantly augmented. Same goes for wind energy activities. Of the two taxonomies, the WASP terminology, we found it out of scope for just general wind energy data publishing, and then the taxonomy of wind energy materials, I think it would be more appropriate to just refer to existing material taxonomies, because I see no reason to limit the scope just to the materials used in the wind energy. I don't think there are any specific existing materials that they use only in the wind energy, not anywhere else, like in aerospace or any other domain. And then last but not least, and the one that I'm going to focus mostly on is the NEAT taxonomy, so a taxonomy of topics. The idea of that taxonomy was the intended use for the taxonomy was to use as a field, as a controlled vocabulary field for Dublin Core subject, and again it had to in some sense transfer the intent of data on what topic it covers, but I found it quite problematic, the use of this taxonomy quite problematic for several reasons. So it's not encompassing enough, so it needs to be augmented. And it might need to be reorganized, and I will briefly go through some examples here. So for example, the topics that exist right now, like economics, operation, maintenance, and siting, in reality, I see them just as activities. So I see no reason why this cannot be just referred to from a taxonomy of activities, which is based on another IRP wind taxonomy of the WEAF, the wind energy taxonomy of activities. when we talk about wind turbine and the topics that are in there, the subtopics like nacelle, rotor, and so on, to me, it feels like, again, this can be, these ideas or this concept can be transferred by using a taxonomy of wind turbine components, for example. Additional things that I feel like should be included would be like a taxonomy of software, or and it can be and taxonomy of wind energy stakeholders, so the audience. And the taxonomy of wind energy project lifecycle phases, which doesn't exist right now. So one possibility to improve, at least that I was thinking, and I would love to hear feedback, is to transform this topic's taxonomy into some kind of not even a taxonomy, but into just a list of taxonomies. Just we say that for wind energy, these are the core taxonomies that are of interest. But a broader problem with this is that, or let's say more ambitious goal is transforming this taxonomy directly into something like a domain ontology, because we can see that most of these, like if it transform it into a list of taxonomies, most of the concepts are related to some cross-domain concept, like the taxonomy of activity is related to a concept of activity, wind power plant, wind turbine, they're related to a concept of asset, and so on. The problem currently with the current organizational principle of taxonomy of topics, it's that one, it's not clear what it strives to achieve, and it mixes often narrower concepts and broader concepts, which should belong into a different classes, top-level classes. So the example was, I don't have it underhand, but basically things like control activity, control strategy would be in right now. There are just narrower topics or subtopics of something like a wind farm or a wind turbine, but the problem is that things like wind turbine and control activity, they should be just in the different places. If you look into something like, if you start to align it with like basic formal ontology, or the open energy ontology is the one that exists currently, which is an effort to create the energy domain level ontology, which is also aligned with BFO. So some ideas again on how it can be, how I see possible solutions. One is obviously right now is when we have a digital object and when it's published, we have the classical Dublin core. So like we have a digital object, and then we have a relationship like Dublin core audience. And then there, for example, we can use the taxonomy of wind energy stakeholders. And then, so we have digital object, Dublin core type, data set. And there, what we can do is we can introduce our application ontology of so wind energy digital object publishing ontology, and we have some kind of relationship that will relate to a concept from wind energy domain if you go the route of creating wind energy domain ontology. So how it can look like, it can look something like it can look something like, I'm not saying this is how it should, but it can look something like we have a wind energy digital object, which is a data set. We can have a relationship that it contains, and then it contains some concepts or describe some concepts that are coming directly from wind energy domain ontology. So here I'm using as a domain ontology, a top level ontology proposed by proposed in the wind energy graph, I think, wind energy systems graph as graph. But it's not given that it has to be like that, but it's just the idea that, like, for example, we have a data set. What does it contain? It contains coordinates, which are, so we say, okay, does it contain some variables? Does it contain some procedure? Does it contain information that is related to some object or to some model? And then again, the variable can be a coordinate. The procedure can be like a photogrammetry, which describes a blade geometry, which describes the blade, which is an output or to a CAD model. Equivalently, the same thing can be done with like software. So if there is a software, what kind of model it is, what kind of variables are in their configuration, or to what kind of objects does it relate to. Obviously, as I failed to mention, each of these objects or variables or procedures can be aligned with the taxonomies we mentioned before. So the object, for example, can be aligned with the taxonomy of wind turbine parts. Procedure can be aligned with the taxonomy of wind turbine activities. But this is just a proposal. There are a lot of open questions. Mainly, what should be the domain ontology? Should we develop our new domain ontology? How granular it needs to be to publish data? And how is it going to relate to existing standards? And there are all of the periphery questions that will obviously arise when we start developing a domain ontology or start publishing it. Is how do we deal with uncertainties or with quality of data? How do we represent the reliability of data? How do we deal with other Dublin core types, not just data sets and software? And one of the questions that we've been discussing quite a lot with Anna Maria recently is how do you, or is it even possible to say something about the intent of the data in general, or not just describe to what it tries to describe the data. So this is the work that has been done so far, and I hope it's a good starting point for further discussion.
All right, thank you. Do we want to spend some time just at the moment? We're about 7 minutes behind the time plan, but we're not probably going to spend half an hour discussing. So we could discuss some of the things you said now, if you want to get inputs from people now, or we could wait until the end and include that in the discussion about the next steps or expectations. What do you think, Yuri?
I would like to do it in the end.
Right. Okay, so then let's go to the next part of the program, where we're going to get hopefully some inspiration about related to nanomaterials. So I'm happy to pass over. I think you can share your screen probably without me doing anything.
Perfect. I will share my screen now. Just make sure I share the right thing though. That's always a challenge. And you're like me and you're afraid to close anything in case it's something critical you were meant to do and you forgot. Okay, let me share that now. Okay. Perfect. So, oh, I didn't press share yet. There we go. Okay, hopefully now you can see it.
Yeah, it's
So,
here.
perfect. Yeah. So I will just talk a little bit about some of the experience that we've had in the World Fair project on how we went about developing our fair implementation profiles, our FIPs, across the World Fair domains, and what we've learned by sharing across them. And I was super interested to hear Yuri already mention GBIF, the Global Biodiversity activities and model, because actually GBIF is one of the ones that we've used quite a lot in World Fair as well, and we have a GBIF profile that I'll talk about in a few minutes, or at least give you the link to it. So I'm going to start a little bit just talking about what the fair implementation profile is, because I'm not sure that everyone is familiar with the approach and the language that goes with it. So basically, the fair implementation profiles are a sort of a tool that was developed by the Go Fair Foundation to help communities convert the theoretical FAIR principles into a collection of machine readable and human readable agreements, or decisions as to how the community will work. Which then together form the fair implementation profile. So what the FIP wizard does is it takes the FAIR principles and it codified a set of questions related to those FAIR principles. And then it allows communities such as the wind energy community to then identify what fair enabling resources they're using. So to make the choices and to document the choices and identify the challenges. So one of the things that we came across when we were doing it in World Fair is that sometimes the community has an aspiration to do something, but it's not quite there yet. So the fair implementation profiles also allow communities to say, this is what we're currently doing, but we'd like to phase it out. And this is what we would like to be doing, but we're not doing it yet. So this is what we plan to adopt. And I think that's one of the very nice things about the fair implementation profiles as well, that you can sort of say, well, okay, here's a snapshot of what we're doing currently, and here's the ambition of where we would like to get to. And there's also quite a bit of guidance on how you make those decisions. So then the fair implementation profile, what results is it's basically a listing of the fair enabling resources that are used by or will be used by a community. And these are the fair implementation communities can also be defined as part of establishing your fair implementation profile. And you can be a sub-community of a larger community, and that's absolutely fine. Basically, the FIP documents the socio-technical approaches, and it needs both technical expertise and domain level expertise. So basically, it is a way to facilitate the conversations that are needed and to bring together those technical experts and domain specific experts. And just a couple of key reflections here, that it's not really about technology development when you're developing your FIP. It's more about choosing from what's already out there, solutions that might work for you. And that's why it's also really useful to do something like we did in World Fair, where we looked each domain, and I'll present the domains in a few minutes. Each domain initially made its own FIP, and then we were comparing across FIPs. And what we realized very quickly was that we are using a lot of the same things, but that not every community automatically thought to determine or to declare that they were using those. There's also what's quite nice in the tool. So there's both an Excel file version of it, or there's the FIP wizard version. And what's quite nice about them is that there's also space to give some to sort of describe why a choice was made, because sometimes things came from a historical reason, or because this was something specific that they just needed to address, and there wasn't a solution, and then maybe another solution came later, but the community have adopted a different one. So documenting those and documenting what would be required to cause or to motivate a community to move from an existing working solution, even if it's not as machine operable as it could be, to a more machine actionable one, is also important. And then I think the key thing is making a choice is more important than what choice you make. So I think just, you know, if you're not quite sure, just indicating what options are available is also useful, because that will then, you know, drive the community to converge around the choices rather than everybody starting from a blank slate and not knowing where to begin. So this is just a little bit more on the socio-technical component. So the pieces that are highlighted in orange are the ones that are that facilitate machine actionable work on the metadata. So a lot of the principles are related to both to metadata and or data, or both. The ones in red are the ones where their technical infrastructure is needed, but that in many cases this technical infrastructure is already available. So think, for example, here, just DOIs for publications, and GBIF, for example, have approaches for identifying samples and things. So there are already quite a lot of identifiers in place that we can use, and other technical solutions that we can use. I think I heard Orocrate mentioned earlier as well, which is, you know, another thing that communities are converging around. Whereas the blue ones then are where this negotiation and community consensus is required. So, you know, what does the community mean by rich metadata? What does the community mean by persistent in terms of identifier? What needs to be accessible? What vocabularies will be used? What are what qualified references will be used, and so forth. So those need to be agreed at the community level in order to work, which means that it can't only be developed by very technical or fair data people. It needs to also bring the research communities around those as well. And then just to a last piece on the high level, what FIPS are. They are based on an ontology as well, which also means that there's, you know, the relationships are defined. So a fair implementation community, such as yourselves, would then be the ones who would declare what the fair implementation profile is. So you would answer the questions and identify the fair enabling resources. And again, a key point is that you're declaring a current use of fair enabling resource, a planned use of it, a planned development of, and or a planned replacement of. So you can really indicate whether, you know, whether it's currently being used, whether it's planned to be used, or whether it still needs to be developed. And that is also useful in terms of tracking the progress in a domain over time. And then there's just a little bit here, again, from the FIP wizard, of the types of fair enabling resources. So again, linked to the different sub-principles, the types of services that you might need. So identifier services, metadata schemas, registries, communication protocols, authorization and authentication, which is clearly a technical solution that, you know, we shouldn't need to be reinventing over and over again. But then things like your structured vocabulary and your semantic model, the usage license, and importantly then the provenance model that you're using. And I'll pick up on that in a minute as well. Oh, sorry, it went slightly off the edge there. The ones with the arrows are basically the ones that have community agreed standards are needed for each of these. And then when you have those community agreed standards, they can be made and formalized into machine actionable approaches. So then just very briefly, since nano is where I come from, so nanomaterials are basically chemicals from a regulatory point of view, but they have properties of particles, which means that they don't fit neatly into existing databases for chemicals, partly because one nanomaterial on its own is a nano object, but they never really exist on their own. They're always in collection. So when we produce nanomaterials, there's a distribution of sizes, there's a distribution of shapes, and we need to to understand that in many cases, the characterization methods that we have are ensemble methods. So that's all I'll say about nano, but just that we do need different ways of doing things and different ways of describing them, which is why we have a dedicated case study on nanomaterials that sits in between the chemistry one and the geochemistry one in our World Fair diagram. What we've been trying to do then in World Fair is, so we had a previous project called NanoCommons that was trying to develop a range of data solutions for nano along the life cycle. And we called it sort of data shepherding, where we had to herd the data through these steps to make it fair. And, you know, at that point, it was quite informal. We were developing various solutions. So electronic lab notebooks, data capture templates, looking at our quality control, quality assurance, data processing steps, looking at predictive modeling steps, and then some of our data and metadata indexing, interoperability, and also then some work around how we would automate the scoring the fairness of the various databases that we're using. So, you know, we had a sort of a structure where it was mapped around the data life cycle, but it wasn't really formalized. So one of the things that we did in World Fair was then to try and map each of these to the specific FAIR principles that they were addressing. And then another, so we did a World Fair Nano FIP to try and cover the whole spectrum just of, at the community level. And then we also worked through an example for a particular nanomaterials focused database. So this was the Nanofaris database, which integrates experimental data, configuration and computational data about the nanomaterial structures themselves, and then computational data about, for example, the reactivity or the environmental fate or other properties of the materials. So again, I'll have links to all the FIPs in a minute, but this is the link to the Nanofaris FIP that you can have a look at. And I will add the slides or share the slides so that I don't know whether a link to the slides can then be put into the common notes in case you want to access the World Fair FIPs. So the Nanofaris FIP then showed that we had pretty good consensus on what we need to do, but not always fully implemented in terms of our persistent identifiers and our globally unique persistent identifiers. We're all pretty happy with the Creative Commons licensing. We have a good handle on our ontologies that are available both through OWL and RDF. Where we were a little bit less concrete in terms of the community decisions were related to interoperability. So we haven't yet got a formalized knowledge representation language. We're still working on structured vocabularies for annotating the metadata, and particularly for the metadata provenance. But we have been doing a lot of work in that area recently. And I just wanted to say, since I just added this additional definition or this additional couple of lines when I heard the earlier mention of GBIF. So we are also leaning towards Provo as the provenance ontology, which underpins GBIF. And then the GBIF fair implementation profile. So GBIF was the global biodiversity I don't know I can't remember what the IF stands for, but anyway, and that was developed also in World Fair, and we've had quite a bit of work looking at mapping across the different domains of World Fair to see whether this event-based model that GBIF uses, where you might have a sampling event or you might have a sensor recording event, and what we found was that it does actually translate very well across domains. So we were able to see how we could use it in the chemistry domain, in the nanomaterials domain, in the geosciences domain, and even as far out as cultural heritage, where you might have digital objects that recorded an event. So, we found that it was a really useful model to build on. This is then just a summary of all of the FIPs that are available for you to have a look at. These are the World Fair FIPs. They are being finalized and will be publicly available if they're not already. They're about to go into Zenodo, into a folder, so it will be possible to see them. So within the chemistry domain, starting in the top red, IUPAC were working on IUPAC standards generally, and that's both digital and paper-based. And then they've also been trying to make their gold book more machine readable and machine actionable as well. And they've developed a FIP for that. I spoke already about the nanomaterials one, so I don't need to say much more. Geochemistry then did quite a bit of work on the Australian geochemistry platform and the data platform, as well as then some of the organizations that feed into that. So the EarthChem Library for Geosciences and the GFZ Data Services for Geochemistry. We also have fair implementation profiles for data related to social surveys, population health, urban health, the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, GBIF, for plant pollinator interactions, for ocean data information systems, disaster risk reduction, and the cultural heritage as represented by the Digital Repository of Ireland. So really a broad range of fair implementation profiles have been developed. And what we're doing now and just finalizing is looking at what's called a convergence matrix. So a convergence matrix is sort of a mapping of here's each of the individual fair implementation profiles for the different research domains. And I know you can't see it. I don't expect you to read it at all, but I just want to show you what you can do with the convergence matrix. And here are all the fair enabling resources that these communities have identified. And what you can see is that some of them are quite common and used across domains, whereas some are used in one or two, and some are used in just one. The color coding of green or blue comes back to the green ones are fair enabling resources that are currently in use and planned to continue in use, whereas the ones that are in blue are ones that the community has declared it needs to adopt but hasn't yet implemented. And all of the red ones are fair enabling resources linked to the F in fair. And then the yellow becomes the A, and then the green, the I, the interoperability, and then blue is the reusability. And I think just one of the things that's very striking, again, just from looking at the color coding, I know you can't read the detail, is that as we get down into interoperability, there's a lot more that is aspirational. This is, we know we need to do it in the different communities, but we haven't yet implemented it. And that's the nanomaterials one there that I'm able to talk about the most. We have quite a bit, as I've said, that we know what we need to do, but we just haven't yet implemented it. So once you have, so I think it can be useful. The Go Fair Foundation have in the FIP Wizard and elsewhere, I think lists, in fact, in the Fair Connect, you can see a sort of a histogram of all the different domains for which fair implementation profiles have been developed. So it could also be a useful starting point to look at some of those. I'm not sure if there'll be any specifically for wind energy, but there may well be for other areas that might be, that there might be some overlap in. And even just looking at some, from other domains shows, some of the things that you can, like DataCite, like Dublin Core, like Provo, the ontologies for provenance, and so on. There will be many things that can be used or reused across communities. And that's what I really wanted to say. I think FIPs are a really useful tool to reflect on the current practice within a community. The comparison of FIPs across communities is useful both in identifying commonalities, but also in terms of differences in understanding of what communities consider to be fair enabling resources. And then there will be a little bit more next week. We have the World Fair has a session next Thursday, I think around the same time as this one, where we will be presenting the knowledge graph, which visualizes what I showed there in a really ugly Excel version into a much more useful way of visualizing the commonalities across the different domains. And we'll also be trying to use that information to determine critical paths or the minimum connections needed to link communities. which will hopefully help to bridge some of that interoperability space where there is currently a lot of things that we know we should do, but are not necessarily doing as yet. And that's it. I hope that was useful as a thought starter, at least, and some experiences that we've had in World Fair using the FIPS.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. It was I definitely learned a hell of a lot there, and I'd be very much appreciate having the slides. Just trying to work out how we're going to manage to do that. No, but I mean, part of it is just being on a map, right? And having, knowing what you don't know, and seeing how we are relative to other sectors. So I like that approach.
Exactly.
No.
And I think the other key message I would say is, some of them, if to really focus on the blue ones, the ones that are specific to the domain, where you need your own solutions, you need your own ontologies and vocabularies and things, because, don't get too bogged down in the technical ones, because, those are generally developed in a way that's not domain specific. So they should be usable across domains and within the wind energy domain as well. So my suggestion is to really focus mostly on the ones where you need sort of community consensus.
Yeah, that's I think that's a really good tip.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have 16 minutes now. 3 things that I want to do is give you opportunity to ask questions to Isolde, and also to give inputs to Yuri on the questions that he already had. And then finally, just to quickly talk about some things related to the next steps in this group, like things like how often and where and how's that going to work, and also any other expectations or questions you've got. So I think we'll go for Isolde's questions right now, because she is here as a one-off. She's not part of our community, and I think she's got so much experience that she's just shared with us that I would say let's ask questions to her if you have any first. I see a bit of a chat going on there as well. So does anyone want to ask something?
Go on.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't find the raise the hand button. Just super quickly, just to get an estimate for us, how much time and how much human resources are needed to create these kind of convergence metrics. It seemed like a massive effort. So can you give us an estimate?
Yeah, I mean, there are tools, and as more of us are working through them, there are now, like, there's a Sparkle query approach that you can use. There is I think one of the Go Fair facilitators has now developed an OR script that you can use. So depending on how somebody in the group will be, I guess, familiar with both of those approaches to be able to do the matrix. But I guess in order to do that, I mean, you could do one based on existing FIPS, as I said, that you can see from in Fair Connect, what FIPS might be out there that are useful already. In terms of generating one or more Fair implementation profiles initially, usually they are facilitated through maybe a 2 to 3 hour discussion group initially, to sort of have a first go filling in just in the Excel version, and then 1 or 2 people get nominated as the community stewards, who then work in the wizard in the FIP wizard to implement it. And then, you might find that you've got to come back and have another couple of discussions. But it's not that huge an amount of work to develop a Fair implementation profile. And then there, depending on how many you want to map, there are tools to do the matrix. I confess I did ours in part by hand, just because I don't know how to use OR scripts.
Maybe just a question for me connected to that as a kind of manager and proposal writing person. So usually, I mean, I haven't run a RDA group before, but in IAA Wind Task 43, it's kind of similar, like the people who are taking part don't get funded to take part. So you have to align stuff, you have to work out things that they're already doing and then align it. And it's like, this is what I'm kind of wondering about, how you, in your example, dealt with that. Like, were all the people involved in this volunteering their time?
Many of them were, or many of them were funded through EU projects, was where a lot of our impetus came from, that people had work to do anyway. And if they were developing tools and solutions, or they were developing data where they had a commitment then to make that data fair, there was a sort of a motivating factor there. But yeah, I think much of it does come based on volunteer time, but which is why I think World Fair was so useful, because it was a funded project specifically looking at the fair implementation profiles as one of the tools we were looking at. So in that case, we had.
You have given me an idea though, because we had contact with an EU consortium who actually came up to IAA Wind Task 43 and said, we're developing a knowledge hub. Can you help?
Yeah.
And that could be an example of saying, okay, well, they've probably got one. They've definitely got at least one assigned person funded to that. So what we need to do is get those people, and I'm sure there's numerous projects like that. We need to get those people.
Yeah.
We need to do.
It is. It's getting the people who are funded anyway to do this, or liaising. So, I mean, for example, in another project, I know in the Netherlands, there's quite a few, there's a fair chemistry cluster, and there's a fair, similarly in Germany. So, it's linking into those groups that are anyway focused on infrastructure for fair, for particular types of data.
Yeah. I
want to ask you something. Sorry, Sarah, did you finish?
No, go for it. No.
I think Nikola Vasilievich, did you meet him?
Pardon?
Nikola Vasilievich.
I'm not familiar with him.
Because I've seen that he was working with someone from the Go Fair.
Okay, yes. I mean, Go Fair work with an awful lot of people, yeah.
And then they did a small group to make the DOI of the wind, of the taxonomies that they produce in IRP Wind.
Yes,
in this project, the shown, and also the metadata.
Yeah.
So so you don't know whether he made a fair profile.
I don't, but what I would suggest is that maybe Sarah drops an email to the Go Fair Foundation. So that's probably Barbara Magnana or Eric Schultes.
Yeah, they are actually. He was working with them. They made a small group, a small kind of.
Yeah.
And actually, it was paid by a project in DTU.
Yeah, exactly. So the Go Fair Foundation, so the reason the Go Fair Foundation has done quite a bit of work in the past on environmental data is that they were, they had projects on environmental data and fair. And then they've also been doing quite a bit recently on chemicals, because they have had funding through the Park project. And I know they have some medical work now as well. So they have, they really are dependent on where the funding is, in terms of being able to put a significant effort behind a particular domain.
They published the metadata in the ontology in the bioportal.
Okay. Yeah.
And the metadata in CEDAR.
Yes. Yeah.
But I agree with you that the problem is to have a technical and domain experts working together.
Exactly.
Because, you cannot do everything. But this one, if someone else has not a question to Isol, I would like to go back to Yuri.
Let me just wait a second. Let me just. The suggestion was that I email the Go Fair Foundation and ask what has been done, possibly by Nicola or by other people.
Yeah,
Is that-
and
is that-
maybe ask if any of their current facilitators have an interest in or a background in energy, because that might be, you know, the Go Fair facilitators or the Go Fair fellows are generally funded data stewards who are working, you know, and they each of them have a specific interest or background. So if one or more of them have a background that's suitable, they could also then, you know, help because it's in their own research area, but they could also help facilitating that, you know, that initial fair implementation profile workshop and
Yeah,
things.
that's a really good idea. Yeah. Can you, who, do I just Google Go Fair Foundation?
No, I can put the names in the chat. So it's Barbara and Eric. I'll put their emails in the chat for you.
Right, yeah, great.
Yeah.
And then just on to what Anna Maria was wanting to start to talk to Yuri, I would just like to question this now. We've got 6 minutes left, and I know that Yuri and Anna Maria can talk to each other in a different setting. I would like to make the most of this setting and only talk about things that are important to this to deciding in the next 6 minutes. And so I'm not 100% convinced that we want to go into the details of Yuri's questions, even though he did have some interesting questions and it would be really great to talk about them. Can we talk about the administrative stuff of this group? And if we have time at the end, talk about the content. Are you okay with that, Yuri? Okay. So just about the administrative stuff, our expectations, how are we going to contribute? I mean, maybe even Ryan can help us. What's expected now of this group? Like we've got 18 months to do quite a lot of stuff. Is a normal way to do things to have like a monthly meeting and have some sort of shared folder where we organize stuff together? Can you give us some guidelines on how that works?
Yeah, so I'll have to go back and look at the well, actually I was looking at it earlier, the specific work plan for the group. So yeah, there's various activities. There's kind of 5 main activities. I mean, initially I think it would be worth setting up. So obviously having this meeting is kind of as part of a kind of semi-public kickoff is good, but it'd be good to have a within the next month or so have a kind of meeting sort of one of the regular working group meetings. I can set that up. I'm have to kind of just reach out to the actual people who've joined the group so far. And yeah, I think, well, initially, I think monthly meetings will be good, but it'll depend on how quickly we want to get started on those individual tasks. And it might be a case that smaller subgroups or people who have active interests or who can actively contribute to the first couple of specific tasks, like the review and evaluation of current fair data landscape in energy, and that they might want to meet more frequently early on, so we can kind of arrange them more ad hoc. But I think it will be good at least to have a time just to have a kind of working group wide monthly meeting. Just to either if there is smaller subgroups meeting, just to update the rest of the group, or just to kind of as a kind of general check-in.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. And is there anything else about the admin side of that, meetings and how to work together, that anybody wants to ask or say?
I mean, I'll have a look at the kind of geographical spread of the members that are on the website already, and obviously, I mean, that doesn't, the people who are there isn't the final list. People can still join the group. But yeah, we'll obviously have to try and come up with a time that suits people, as many people as we can. So it's kind of, I guess at the moment it looks like it's spread across Europe and North America. But obviously we'll have a look see if there's any more there.
Yeah, just a note on that. Like I can't work after 5 p.m. European time, and the US people who are based in Mountain Time can't work before 3 p.m. So the slot between 3 and 5 is basically the slot. Thursdays we have IEA Task 43 meetings. They're completely ruled out. Just for your information. But we can also connect bilaterally to work out some time that's definitely going to work for me. By the way, talking about that, members, Sean Sheng is supposed to be co-chair, and he's not going to be able to be co-chair anymore or at all. He's not really into the topic at all. He agreed sort of short term because I asked and he wanted to help me. But it means we actually are looking for a co-chair, and I think the co-chair should be US probably US based. And we're probably looking for more members like in countries like Australia and stuff. So I just ask you if you're interested in being a co-chair, let me know. If you know people who are in Asia or Australian region, please also, who are interested in wind energy, fair wind energy data, then let me know that as well. I would just now stop, I think. I think these inputs, these questions that Yuri got are a really good topic of the next meeting. Plus, making more concrete some of these ideas that we've now got about what FIP is and how we can start implementing it and what that involves. I think there's a decent amount of thinking and discussion to do on that. So I would just leave it like that, unless somebody has got something they really desperately want to know in the next 1 minute.
Just sorry, 1 minute, because the concept, the taxonomy of the topics that do you really want to unfold another way, actually is one of the topic, one of the metadata, Dublin Core metadata as a subject that we moved as a wind energy specific. And this is a kind of a mapping the wind energy field. So when we talk about something, we know where precisely we are, which life cycle moment we are, and so on. So that's the reason why we did in that way. And because that was the main, I'm working in resource assessment, and I have data from resource assessment. So I put the data in resource assessment there. That is the first target that I give, because other experts can do the same with my data. There was the idea of to find the data, to target the data according with which kind of subject they were collected and they can be used. That's why I wouldn't do that. I mean, it's a discussion we can take. I think it's an interesting discussion.
Okay, well, let's join that. Let's put that on the agenda for next time as well. Thank you. Martin just suggested sending around a doodle to find a time for the first meeting. Yeah, I think Ryan can take over that task.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no problem.
But from my point of view, I need regular meeting slots. I can't do it month by month randomly, otherwise you'll never get me. I need to have some regular meeting time planned. But yeah, let's do that. And Martin, you already suggested offering your inputs on World Fairs, and I think that would be also a thing that I'm going to write down for. Let's definitely talk about that next time. So thank you for that suggestion. And yeah, just Ryan put in the chat, please join the working group at that list if you're not actually in that working group. Otherwise, you won't get the invitation, maybe. And also put your email address in the collaborative notes document that Ryan put in the chat twice now at the beginning of this meeting. So I think Yuri, Lewis, Isolde haven't put their details in. Maybe you could just quickly do that. Yeah. And then Ryan, I presume I'm supposed to put some things in the summary there, which I'll do as soon as I can.
I can do it. I'm happy to do that. I mean,
right. I put a couple of notes in there already, but please feel free to then add. All right. I really need to go.
Yeah, and I'll link the slides to that document as well, just so people can refer back to them at the stage.
Perfect. Well, thanks everyone for coming, and yeah, it was really interesting, and I hope it was interesting for you, and it's made you motivated to want to contribute to this group. And if you know anyone else who might want to contribute, please invite them as well. And otherwise, hopefully we'll see you at the next meeting.
Good luck all.
Thank you. Thanks everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.